Okay, welcome to Beauty in Between. I'm Lauren,
And
and
I'm Melissa.
yes, and so the Beauty in Between, we are hoping to create just this space where we can talk. And do you want to kind of share how you came up with your part of the title, or how we came up with the title? I can't remember who exactly.
I think you actually instigated it. We were
Okay.
trying to come up with the title and shooting off ideas, and one of them you said the beautiful in between.
Oh, yes.
And I, for some reason, really struck with the word beauty, mainly because of the movie Collateral Beauty, which I don't know if you've seen that movie. It is a beautiful movie. And the reason why the movie is called Collateral Beauty is because when Will Smith is the actor, his daughter dies, and this lady in the hospital comes up to him and says that he needs to notice the collateral beauty in his life. And I looked that up and what the heck is collateral beauty? And in it, it talks about the acts of selfless kindness that follow tragedy.
Mm.
And that really resonated just with me, and what we're trying to accomplish in the podcast is, in a way, our tragedies right now are our doubts,
Yeah.
and our questions. And I think there's a lot of beauty that can now come from all these questions that we have.
Yeah. I like that. I know I laughed when you said the tragedy that we're going through right now, which maybe kind of sounds like an extreme word for it, but I think it is a fitting word because that is kind of how it feels. I think we've both had that where it's felt very strange. And in fact, I don't know if it was on like today that I wanted to mention it, but I think I've mentioned to you the analogy of almost feeling like there's been this heavenly earthquake. Like your concept, the way you've been raised to think about heaven or just like taught to think about heaven has kind of like shattered a little bit because of an earthquake. And but then we get to like pick up the pieces and kind of be like, oh, does this look like God to me? Does this have God's loving fingerprint on it? And kind of restructure our beliefs in a way that resonates more with us.
I think it's more personal this way, though. Like
Yes.
growing up, you are just told this is what you believe, this is kind of what things are. And now I feel that I'd say past 2 months talking with you and all of my struggles, really it's become more personal to me now than it ever has been in the past.
Well, I think we've both talked about how it's almost like we're more spiritual now that we're able to kind of discuss things that we're questioning or things that we're doubting. And not even necessarily things that we're questioning or doubting, but just thoughts that we have about things. It's like I'm way more spiritual right now, and my husband and I have way more spiritual discussions in our home now since kind of opening up and being okay to question things and almost question everything. Like I've definitely had to go through a whole deconstructing everything and kind of starting at like ground one, like space zero, just being like, okay, well, first, like, is there a God? and almost just going from there.
Yeah. It's hard though, because I think this is a point where when people have doubts and have questions, this is a point where people tend to either fall away or tend to just blindly follow other people. And I guess this is the point of what we are talking about, of the in between.
Yes.
Is we are wanting to create a culture of being in between, and it's okay. You don't have to be outside of the church. You don't have to be completely in the church. It's okay to be this middle ground of feeling comfortable of where you're at and where your testimony currently is.
Which I feel like isn't really a message that you get anywhere. I feel like definitely in church meetings.
Even in a worldly aspect too.
Yeah, you can't. It's almost like it's black and white. There is no gray area. Whereas for us, obviously, and we're finding a lot of other people, there's a lot of gray area, and we're finding it actually a really beautiful place to be. Well, and I love that we're doing this and that we're talking about this because it gives us our own spiritual authority. Like no one else gets to judge or qualify how spiritual you are or how spiritual I am. Like our relationship with God and heaven is ours. Like we get to qualify what that is. And, just because we may see certain issues differently, even from each other, but like differently just from others in the church or others out of the church, that doesn't mean that like we're any less worthy of anything or any less smart or anything like that. Yeah.
The church isn't a one-size-fit-all type of thing, which I think in the past has for sure been a thing where it all is supposed to be the same for everybody. But I'm noticing even more and more, I had my problems, right? And I voiced it to my parents, who are obviously strong church members. And I felt that I was hit in a spot where I just didn't feel comfortable in talking to them because they were so, they knew, right?
Yes.
And then as soon as I opened up to you, and then as soon as I started opening up to other people, I realized there's a lot more people in my position who don't see the church as a one-size-fits-all type of situation, that we all have our different struggles.
Yes.
Like what's hard for you about the church is not hard for me.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And we've talked about that.
And it's just very, I don't know, that's where the beauty comes to play of being in the in-between, is we're different in our views, but we're the same in being that in-between spot.
Yes, and we're both comfortable and want to support each other in this in-between spot. Yeah. And I, because obviously, like, I've kind of told you, like, yeah, I've been met with just, like, people not being comfortable with it. And like, it's no fault or shame to any of them, because it's like, well, they grew up in the way they grew up, and like their faith is their faith. But I guess in talking to each other, we're kind of like, well, it's okay for us to have our own perspective on the gospel, which that's something that we were talking about a lot before, where for us, for a lot of people, the church and the gospel are the same thing. But for us, and I think for a lot of people, as we're finding, they are different things. Like the true gospel of Christ, the church, I personally feel, is not there yet. I think the gospel of Christ is perfect. I don't think the church is perfect yet. I think it has potential, but it's not there yet, for sure. I think I'm all about the analogies today. Another thing that I love about our title, The Beauty in Between, is kind of with that whole concept of in or out, you know, the light or the dark. Being in between, it's sometimes you hear the term like, oh, they're on the fence. And it's implied to be very negative. But I was like, well, let's think about this. Like, the person on the fence gets a fuller picture. They can see both sides. You know, they're seeing everything over here and they're seeing everything over here. And it's almost like this beautiful spot in between. This being on the fence allows us to almost be the like mediator between the two.
I was going to say, it seems like a bridge to me. It's
Yeah.
bridging between the world and the gospel.
Yeah, which
you know?
isn't that what Christ was all about?
You would think that that's all that is in the scriptures, that we would be teaching that same principles, but yeah. I don't know. I just really love the idea of that fence, that bridge, of being able to be the connection between both. Because I've been on the end where I've told people who are not of our faith and don't even know much about it, like, oh yeah, I don't do this, I don't do that. And like, you don't do that? You've never done that before?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. And then you are on the opposite side of, oh hey, I just got a second piercing, and then LDS members are, what?
How could you ever?
And then you, in the worldly aspect, is you got a second piercing and they're telling you that it's not okay. That
Like, how controlling. How
Yeah.
cult-like, Melissa. Yeah.
So this is where I think that fence and bridge comes into play, of being that mediator, like you said, between both, because that's exactly what Christ was. He was the mediator between
Yeah.
both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that bridged that gap to be able to make it not such a stark difference between the two.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. So I guess, do you want to share a little bit, like, what are you hoping to create with this? Like, what are you hoping this space can be for us, for others?
I don't know how we actually decided to do this. I think it was...
I was saying stuff to you on Marco Polo, and you're like, Lauren, you should start a podcast.
And then I think it was more of a joke, but I was actually genuinely being like, oh, Lauren would be really good in a podcast. And then somehow we took it very literal, and here we are creating a podcast.
Yeah.
But I think the main reason was, at first, it's for my personal benefit, I would say. I don't want to be selfish and be like, well, this podcast is for me. But at first, that's kind of really what it was, of discovering, okay, where am I at? Can I find peace in where I'm at? And I've noticed by talking to people where I'm at, they share the same beliefs and same problems or concerns. And I think that's now what I'm realizing with the podcast is a way for us to be able to create this safe space that other people can come and shake their heads and be like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. Or, hey, I'm in the same position as this gal and she's doing this, maybe I could do that too, you know?
Yes, yeah. With the concept of this safe space, I wanted to kind of add, like, I want it to kind of be that watering hole kind of thing. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, you know, you've got the watering hole in the desert and all the animal, you know, like, everyone goes there and everyone's safe around each other, and like, it's okay to be there, and we like get nourishment there. Like, I want it to be that. I want, like, people to feel comfortable exploring. I want ourselves to be comfortable exploring our own beliefs and just kind of being this watering hole, this safe space to come and learn and grow from each other.
I want it to be able to not only be a safe space here, but eventually make it so it can be a safe space everywhere else too. That by creating this space here, people will now be like, okay, there's a lot more people in my position. I'd love to share this in church one day. And that way it creates this safe space, not just here, but in wards and in houses.
And actually the church as a whole.
And eventually a global change.
Yes.
For everybody.
Yeah.
To have a safe space and talking about what they struggle with or what their testimony is. Because I remember being in this spot where, okay, I don't really know what I believe, but I want to bear my testimony on being in this in between. And so many people came up to me after and said, your testimony really resonated with me. And there's a lot more people than we think in our position of being not all in or not all out.
Yes.
In the church, at least for me, and I would say for you as well, this is now, the church is our identity, right? The gospel is part of our identity.
Oh, yes.
It's always. And so to just leave it, it's really hard for me to do, and I do find courage for the people who do decide to, because that in itself is a lot of courage. But there's also courage in staying and voicing what you believe and what you have hard time grasping, and being able to share those beliefs in a safe space for other people to also be like, you know what, that's actually me too.
Yes. I love that you brought that up about, it being part of identity, not wanting to leave the church, because there have been many times in my life where I've had to eat my words. And this is definitely one of them where in the past I have said, if someone's not happy with everything in the church, like no one's forcing them to be part of it. Like they can leave, like not a big deal. And now I am the person doubting and questioning and not happy with everything in the church. And I'm like, I don't want to leave. It's my church too. Like there's a lot of beauty here. and yeah, I don't want to leave. I want to help it progress and grow, because contrary to what a lot of people think about the church being constant and always staying the same, it has not. From, the time it was started until now, it has gone through a lot of changes. There are a lot of things that have been taken away and then added.
It's ongoing. It's not fully restored yet. It's
and
still
maybe this can help. Yes.
Yeah. I think even if we don't reach the masses, really just reaching one person like Christ did is really all that we need to do.
Yes.
And I guess our hope, my hope would be that just one person is touched by it, and that one person goes out and shares their beliefs.
Yeah.
And one person can then affect the masses for us.
Yeah, I love it. Because I definitely know, since being very open and genuine about where I am, there's been a lot of love I've found. Like love for myself even, learning to not be ashamed of like having certain preferences about things. And I think you could maybe say the same, just like, you know what, I wanted that second piercing. I'm going to do that because it's something that I want for myself. And it's like a form of self-love almost, to just allow yourself to have your relationship with our Heavenly Parents in the way you want to have it, and know that your authority with that is valid. So yeah, I think in summary, and maybe we can wrap up now, but in summary, we're hoping to create just an open-ended dialogue about faith, doubt, and the beauty found in the in-between.
I have nothing to add to that. That was a perfect ending.
Okay, perfect. Well, anyone who does find this and sticks around, we hope that you stick around, and we look forward to just having this space to connect with each other and with others and explore spirituality and beliefs.
Amen.
Okay.